Hey DC Mac, I wanted to take you through a quick tutorial on consumer actions and the multiplier. For this case, I want you to imagine that you came to school today and I offered you $100. What would you do with it? Some of you guys would spend it, some of you guys would save it, some of you guys would kind of do some part of saving and some part of spending, depending on your own personal circumstances. So in economics, we have some terms for that. The first thing that we've got is something called the marginal propensity to save, or the MPS. So this is how much people would save instead of consume when there's a change in income. So it's always expressed as a fraction or a decimal, and all we're doing is we're saying how much did you get in additional income and how much did you choose to save instead of spend. So if you look at the equation for solving this, MPS equals the change in saving divided by the change in income. So for example, if I receive $100 and I save $60 of it, what I'm going to do is 60 divided by 100, so your MPS would be 0.6. The next thing we're going to look at is if you chose to actually spend your money. So that would be the MPC, or the marginal propensity to consume. This is how much people would consume rather than save. You're going to go spend your cash on something awesome. You're going to go buy some movie tickets, you're going to go buy a pair of shoes, maybe you need gas for your car. So it's always expressed as a fraction or decimal, just the same as the other, and we're going to take your change in income and do a little bit of math with it. So your MPC will equal the change in your spending divided by your change in income. So for example, if you receive $100 and you spend $50, your MPC would be 0.5. If you receive $100 and you spend $80, your MPC would be 0.8. And obviously if you receive $100 and you spend $100, you didn't save a thing, so you spent everything you got, so 100 divided by 100, you've got 1 as your MPC. So if you haven't noticed already, consumers only have two choices, which means your MPC and your MPS added together will always equal 1. And of course there's math that you can play around with this, but you may see some questions where it says something like, if you receive $100 and your MPC is 0.7, what is your MPS? So simply I do 1 minus 0.7, which makes my MPS 0.3. And then a second part to that question might say, okay, so how much are you going to spend? They want to know that you know spending equals consumption, so you say, I'm going to spend $70. Now, why is this true? Because you can only save or consume your disposable money that you receive. There are really no other choices. Even if you put it in your bank, you're technically saving. If you decide to buy a share of stock, you're consuming that share of stock. So really anything that you do will be either savings or consumption. Now, one of the things that we like to do once we start looking at how people spend money in an economy is ask ourselves questions like, why do cities want the Super Bowl or the Olympics or a major sporting event or the national conventions during election season? Well, because an initial change in spending is going to set off a spending chain that is magnified throughout the economy. So let's say Bobby comes to town for the Super Bowl and spends $100 on Jason's products. Well, now Jason has $100 new. What's he going to do with it? Well, he's going to spend some and he's going to save some. So Jason has some more income, so let's say he spent all of it. Jason's going to spend $100 at Nancy's store. Nancy now has another $100. Well, Nancy has a whole bunch of money, so she's going to go to Tiffany's store and she's going to buy something at Tiffany's store. And this works its way through the entire economy. Now we have a $300 increase in consumer spending simply because of the initial $100 increase from Bobby coming to town to watch some football. So the multiplier effect is what this is called. And what we say is spending is magnified through the economy because of how people do life. So the multiplier effect, to give you a quick calculation here, is calculated as 1 divided by the MPS. Or if you're given the MPC, you just need to do a quick little bit of math. So 1 divided by 1 minus the MPC. So the size of the multiplier depends on the MPC. The higher the MPC, the higher the multiplier. In other words, the more money that you spend, the greater the impact the multiplier will have. And that makes a little bit of sense. If I get $100, but I only spend $20 in the economy, it's not going to have as big of an impact as it floats through the economy in several series of purchases. But if I get $100 and say I spend $90, there's a much bigger impact to the local economy. So, as the marginal propensity to consume falls, the multiplier effect becomes less effective. So it's actually really good for our economy if people choose to spend instead of save. So how is your spending multiplied? I want to give you an example of what happens when the MPC is 0.5 and when it's 0.8. Same sort of conditions. We're all in the Super Bowl. People come to town and we're going to spend money at Ashley's restaurant. On the side over here where the MPC is 0.5, you can follow the spending down and see that the $100 of spending at Ashley's restaurant comes into her restaurant. She's going to save $50 and spend $50. Well, when Carl's salon finishes doing her hair, he's got $50 of income. He is going to save $25 and spend $25. So apparently he bought fruit at Dan's fruit stand, and Dan now has $25 more of income. He's going to save half and spend half, and it's going to float through the economy. Well, in the same set of conditions, assume that the MPC is 0.8 in this town now. So you're going to spend 80% of what you take in. Here's how big of a change it can be. Ashley takes in that $100 at her restaurant from people who are spending money at her restaurant. She's only going to save $20 in this case and spend $80 getting her hair done at Carl's salon. Well, now that he has $80, he's only going to keep 20%. He's going to spend 80%, which is $64 at Dan's fruit stand. Now that he has $64, he's going to save a little bit and spend a lot. And as you can see, you've got more dollars floating through the economy. What this ends up looking like is the change in GDP. Aha! We're going back to last unit. The change in GDP is calculated by the multiplier times the change in initial spending. So if the MPC is 0.5, my change in GDP is 1 divided by 0.5 times 100, or $200. If my MPC is 0.8, my change in GDP is 1 divided by 0.2 times $100, or $500. So you can see that higher MPC is better for the economy. Now, this made sense until I showed you dividing by fractions, didn't it? Here's your quick math moment of the day. In your head, without a calculator, see if you can do these 4 quick problems. Having trouble? Let's talk about ways to cheat at math. Don't tell your math teachers. All you have to do is take your fractions and be a rebel with the decimal places. So in my first example, 1 divided by 0.5, I can play around with the decimal places and it's the same thing as 10 divided by 5 or 2. Super simple. 1 divided by 0.2, if I play with the decimal places again, is the same as 10 divided by 2 or 5. 1 divided by 0.1, same thing, is 10. 1 divided by 0.25. This time you got to move the decimal 2 places, but that's okay. It's the same as 100 divided by 25, or simply 4. Don't be freaked out by dividing by decimals. Just be a rebel. I promise it'll work out for you. Now, let's do a couple of examples very quickly of what this might look like in questions that you could be asked. So suppose the government decides to lower income taxes by a lump sum of $1,000, and the MPC is 0.9 in this economy. Well, Americans get $1,000 back in their pockets. They're going to save $100 and spend $900. So in our economy now, we have $900 of new spending that multiplies by a factor of 10 because we have to calculate the multiplier, right? And so what we end up with is the $1,000 tax cut eventually multiplies into $9,000 of additional real GDP because of how money flows through the economy. So it's a pretty good deal. In our second example, suppose the government is experiencing an inflationary gap. Our current output is $800 billion above our potential GDP, and inflation is starting to hurt the economy. If the MPC is 0.75, how much does the government have to change its spending to get everything back under control. All I simply have to do is go, okay, I have to go 1 divided by 0.25 is 4. I'm going to take the $800 billion that I need to change in my spending, and I'm going to say, okay, 4 times what is going to give me an $800 billion change in my economy? The answer is I need to change my spending by $200 billion to get an $800 billion shift in the economy. We'll talk about this a little bit more as we go through this unit, but I just wanted to show you this in advance. Hope this helped, and as always, be sure to ask me any questions that you have. Thanks.